Hey everyone, welcome back to After Action Review. I am your host, Sergeant Dan. Today we'll be reviewing Returnal, PlayStation 5 exclusive that has a bit of a mixed bag for a lot of people. So let's go ahead and get into it. So Sony this year started their next generation console at a bit of a jog. Demon's Souls being the first PlayStation 5 exclusive. A few months afterwards we went and got a couple more. The big ones being both Ratchet and Clank and, as you see, Returnal. This game was developed by House Masquerade. Top-end games for this generation. $70 I think is pushing it a little too high, and this is why a main reason this game has faltered a little bit. One of these key points to this is that its runtime, without this roguelike mentality and without dying multiple times, is mostly subpar. And when I say subpar, it really doesn't reach even a 20-hour time frame, where many outlets are saying it took them 20 hours. I did the entire thing along with the secret ending, I don't know if they actually completed or talked about in any of their reviews, in 16 to 15 hours. So in the long run, the game's definitely trying to punch at a weight of games that are significantly going to be better than it this year, along with games hopefully coming out next year, which will also just blow this one out of the water. This is why, in my eyes, this game's going to be something of a man-eater type game, where I was hyped to play it, so lackluster that it's going to be my right now slap of approval of this game being the most disappointing game of 2021. But we will see if something else would actually top that list, because we still got a few more months to go. Actually, there might be already a game out that I'll talk about a little later that is in that ballpark, but this one for now is topping that list of my most lackluster game of 2021. So a big question people might be asking is, where does this game miss the mark? Graphically, it looks good. It's a game with a lot of creativity. It looks as you would expect a game that would draw in a crowd to look. But shortly after that, when you're drawn in, you start to notice that this game would not be able to retain that same audience. And it's not because, people are worried about the game only running at 1080p with ray tracing with 60 frames a second, because all of that are good benchmarks, especially with ray tracing. Ray tracing taxes anything so harshly that games are surprisingly able to stay above 1080p. Although this one doesn't do it spectacularly, because there are dips in frame rate which do cause a hindrance in gameplay. All the way down close to 40 to 45 frames a second for sometimes up to 4 or 5 seconds during these large engagements in the game, where fighting is probably one of the more important aspects of it, and being able to dodge an attack. If you miss that dodge, it's definitely going to ruin that engagement and your overall perception of the game itself. I'll be honest, one of the two features of this console generation that I still cannot seem to grasp why Sony would do such a thing, one being the audio issue, another video on another channel I did, along with the haptic feedback. Games like this, where you're supposed to play for a long time, get to new places, be engaged, you can't actually do any of that with the haptics in the shoulder buttons on this controller, because it always forces your finger back, and long play sessions are starting to actually suck on a console like this because of feedback like that, which in the long run is most likely why I will be turning all off in future games, all haptic feedback, because people are saying it's like pulling a gun trigger. It's not. I own guns. I have guns. I've shot guns. This is not how a gun works. This is not how guns feel. How are you saying to people that use weapons, this is how a gun should feel? Because it does not feel like a gun at all. I know they're adding this into more and more features, but until they get it to be smooth and non-interruptive to experiences in game, I will find it annoying to use. So, talking more about the game itself, even though it's just like a Binding of Isaac roguelike, and it does bring in a number of enemies, which is actually the nice thing about this game. All these particular enemies are stationed to their specific biome. The first time going to this forest, the very first time you play it, you get a tree-like creature that tries to kill you. I call him Groot just because why not? But the big thing is, he's not here. This is the second time through this biome. He is not here this time, which is very odd because you would think that if you're playing the biome again, you'd get the same creatures. This is where the time travel portion of the game comes into play, where there are different levels. You have this biome, the second forest biome, the desert, the winter landscape, and then the two final locations, which are very much in the alien form similar, but at the same time very much separated from each other. And I can't complain about any of this. The creatures, the landscapes, how you move around, the combat itself, all of this is great. If it didn't have the underlying issues of frame rate, of the story, of sometimes in instances like I'll be sharing shortly, of enemies so brokenly overpowered, which I guess would be normal for a roguelike, but when I'm saying brokenly overpowered, it's you can try to build up anything to fight these, but they're harder than most bosses in the game, which would make sense because it's a roguelike, but at the same time, it does kind of drown out the experience in the long run, though it didn't really stop me that often to completing the game in less than 16 hours, which is one of the biggest defeating points to it, is frame rate issues, crashes, having to restart if the game ever bugged out and kicked me out, or the big PlayStation bug, which they still haven't fixed. That lovely put it in rest mode, lose all of your games. Had to factory reset this to actually rebuild this game because this is the only game that it actually affected. Anything that makes you close down the game, you have to completely restart, which I guess is okay for roguelikes, but the only way to stop that from happening is to put the game into rest mode, which, just as I explained before, PlayStation still has not seemed to have fixed the issue with their rest mode or their resuming of games. You can't put this game in the rest mode. You have to shut down your PlayStation every time. That's why I kind of, after I had it rebuilt and got back my save, I had to go ahead and just play through the game for about 8 hours to finish off the last section and grab the remaining items to perform the secret ending, which still 16 hours. I'm going to keep reiterating that because the 16-hour mark for a $70 game not be that short. I'm not going to go back to be a completionist because my last few things I have to do are all weapon leveling, which if I already beat the game, why am I going to go level weapons? There's really no replayability after you get the secret ending. And other platinum trophies are picking up items like cursed little fungi, items you haven't used. It's really not enthralling to continue to play again. So let's go ahead and break it down. Story, meh, it's forgettable. No one's gonna care about this story in the long term because it's just there. It's just not that great. Graphically it looks great. Resolution's a little low, but that's what's happening when you introduce ray tracing and try and keep it at a 60 frame rate game. Even though this game's actually going to need that frame rate, even though it doesn't actually maintain it all that well during the hardcore gunfights that it's trying to keep. Problems with crashes. Hopefully they fix more of them as this comes out, but I had a few which kind of destroyed the whole flow of the game that I was trying to keep up with. Was it worth $70? I didn't buy it at $70, so no, actually in the long run it's still not worth $70. It's not really worth $60. There is a lot to it, but the gameplay will not save a game that is this short from needing something that should have been less cost to the consumer in the long run. But the main problem with the game still, after the frame rate, after the cost, after the story that's so meh, is that it ends on a note that is just disappointing to a game that should feel like it has more, but it's just left you there with nothing. And it's not because I think they're coming out with a number 2. They should do something like Maneater and just do a DLC content to finish the story off and give us something, or maybe give us a DLC that explains the mother side, because from the story I feel like there's something missing with this planet and the mother as well. But for the review at the end of the day, if I have to give it a number score, this game's going to be sitting between a 6 and a 6.5 out of 10, which kind of just makes it fall a bit underneath the 6.5 to 6.7 score I gave Maneater the year prior. I understand this could anger a number of fans, even though the game only sold about 550,000, and the scores are ranging from A, this is good, to A, this is not great. I don't really go with critics because they're much harder to side with, although it's really hard to find a website that's actually comparable to what the fans think, because sometimes they're hit by a mass flood of negative reviews by either people that don't even play the game, have no intention of playing the game. In the long run, I would have to mostly agree with a couple of the critics I did see, though. The game is a 6 to 6.5. It's nothing mind-blowing. It's not the most incredible thing ever. It's playable. And depending if you like Binding of Isaac and the replayability that a game story like that has, which really isn't that much either, it's probably something for you. But in the long run, most average people that see stuff about this game, its roguelike, its difficulty, are more likely not going to pick it up. Well, that's just my thoughts, and this be Dan with After Action Review. See you next time.